My name is Thea Afton and I'm 31 years old. The year I learned what a manila folder could do to a family. My grandmother, Lorraine, turned 79 on a Saturday in October. She baked her own cake, vanilla with buttercream roses, her specialty since before I was born. She set the table for 8 with paper napkins, the good plates, and dried hydrangeas from her garden. Nobody came. My parents were skiing in Aspen. My brother sent a text at 4:15. "Happy birthday, Gran. Skiing is amazing." My father didn't text at all. My mother posted a ski goggle selfie to her church group chat with the word, "blessed." I drove 3 hours from Hartford after my shift and found my grandmother sitting alone in the kitchen. Candles melted down into the frosting and ice cream gone soft. She looked at me as if she wasn't sure I was real. I cut her a slice of cake and sang happy birthday. The next day, while I was helping her clean the house, 2 strangers knocked on the door. They handed me a thick, sealed folder signed in my grandmother's own handwriting. What happened after that ended my family as I knew it. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary people set quiet boundaries that change everything, and dignity always gets the last word. If stories about standing up for someone who can't stand up for themselves hit close to home, drop a comment and subscribe. That evening stayed pressed into me like a thumbprint in wet clay. I'd left Hartford at 5, still wearing my work flats, with a gas station bouquet on the passenger seat. 3 hours on I-95, then the back roads through Briarwood, where the oaks arched over the pavement like a cathedral ceiling. I pulled into her gravel driveway at 8:12. The porch light was on. Every other window was dark. Inside, the kitchen table told the whole story. Place settings. A centerpiece of dried hydrangeas she'd arranged that morning. The cake sat in the middle of the table, vanilla buttercream roses and 79, written in pink gel. The candles had burned down to waxy nubs stuck in the frosting, and a gallon of Neapolitan ice cream had sweated through its carton onto the tablecloth. My grandmother sat at the head of the table in her lavender cardigan, her hands folded around a glass of water. "Nora," she smiled then frowned. "Is it Tuesday?" "It's Saturday, Gran. Your birthday." "Oh." She touched the cake. "I thought I was making this for the church bake sale." I put the flowers in a mason jar and fixed her a plate. We ate cake with our hands because neither of us felt like washing forks. I sang happy birthday twice because halfway through the first time she asked me to start over. At 10 I carried her to bed. She weighed almost nothing. Her wrist was barely wider than a paper towel roll. As I pulled the quilt to her chin, she grabbed my hand. Her eyes suddenly went sharp and focused, like a radio catching a signal through static. "They think I don't notice," she whispered. I waited for more, but she was already asleep. "I should tell you who I am in this family. The Caldwells of Briarwood are a particular kind of Connecticut comfortable. My father, Gregory, managed regional accounts for an insurance brokerage until he could golf 3 times a week and call it consulting. My mother, Diane, organized charity galas and sat on the library board. My brother, Aaron, ran a small construction development firm called Aaron Caldwell Properties and drove a German sedan that cost more than my annual salary. Then there was me, the paralegal. I worked at a 4-person elder law firm in Hartford, handling wills, trusts, and guardianship filings. I earned $47,000 a year and studied for the bar at night. My family called me the paperwork one. At holiday dinners, Diane would tilt her head and say, "Nora is still doing her little legal assistant thing," as if I were selling friendship bracelets at a farmer's market. I never argued. I read fine print. But this house was mine in every way that mattered and in no way that counted. I took my first steps on the kitchen linoleum. Lorraine taught me to read a lease on the back porch when I was 19. Her reading glasses perched on her nose and a red pen between her teeth. She co-signed my first apartment because my parents wouldn't. I slept in the guest room that night and lay awake tracing the crack in the ceiling I'd been tracing since I was 6. Around midnight I got up for water. On the hallway shelf, behind a framed photo of the family, I found a business card. Brenda Voss, Voss and Dean Realty. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, someone had written, Comp value, $680,000. Quick close possible. Put the card back. My hands were steady, but my stomach wasn't. Sunday morning, I scrubbed the kitchen while Lorraine dozed in her recliner. The cake went into Tupperware. The melted candles went into the trash. I wiped buttercream off the good plates and stacked them in the cabinet where they would sit until someone came to clear out the house someday. That thought landed wrong. I shoved it aside. 10:15 someone knocked. Two people stood on the porch. The woman was about 60, with a silver bob, a wool coat, and a leather briefcase. The man beside her was younger, maybe 40, carrying a notary seal in a zippered pouch. "Nora Caldwell?" the woman asked. "Yes. My name is Ruth Adler. This is my colleague Nathan Pruitt. Your grandmother retained my firm 14 months ago." She held out a thick manila folder sealed with a wax paper flap. My grandmother's name was printed on the tab in blue ink. "She asked us to deliver this to you," Ruth said. "Personally." I stared at the folder. "When the time comes." "When the time comes for what?" Ruth glanced through the screen door toward the recliner, and her expression softened by a degree. "Come to my office when you're ready. Here's my card. Don't discuss this with your parents before we talk." They were in their car and pulling away before I could form a second question. I stood on the porch holding the folder. It was heavier than it looked. Maybe 40 pages. The seal had been signed across the flap in Lorraine's handwriting, looping and deliberate, the way she signed birthday cards and Christmas checks. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane. "Who is at the door? Don't sign anything, Nora." I turned the phone face down and brought the folder inside. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where the birthday cake had sat untouched the night before, and ran my finger along the sealed flap. Lorraine's signature crossed the seal. I recognized every curve, the capital L with its exaggerated tail, the double loop on the lowercase r. This wasn't a shaky mark. This was written by a woman who knew exactly what she was putting her name on. Broke the seal. Inside was a stack of legal documents I recognized from work. A recorded deed, a trust instrument, a durable power of attorney, notarized witness pages, and a physician's letter on medical letterhead dated 14 months earlier. Clipped to the front was a handwritten note on Lorraine's personal stationery, cream paper and blue ink, the same deliberate script I'd seen on the folder. "Nora, when they come for the house, open this. Everything you need is here. Love you. Sorry. It has to be you." I read the note 3 times. Each time the words, "when they come for the house," landed harder. Not if, when. 14 months ago, before the forgetting had become so bad. Before she started calling me by my mother's name, before the wandering, before the stove was left on, before the day she got lost driving to the post office 2 blocks away. She had known someone would come for the house. She had prepared. I closed the folder and pressed my palm flat on top of it. Through the doorway, I could hear Lorraine snoring lightly in her recliner, a crossword puzzle slipping off her lap. She had hired a lawyer. She had signed documents. She had left me instructions. That note kept me awake all night. I lay in the guest room with the folder on the nightstand, watching the ceiling and listening to the house breathe. Monday morning I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Something in me said to stay. I found it while taking out the recycling. A realtor's combination lockbox clamped to the gas meter behind the hydrangea bushes, tucked just out of sight from the front walk. I knew what it was immediately. I'd seen them on every listing in Briarwood. Somebody had been showing this house. I went back inside and opened Lorraine's mail pile. 3 weeks of unsorted envelopes sat on the hallway table, buried between a phone bill and a coupon flyer. I found an off-market listing sheet printed on Voss and Dean Realty letterhead, the same Brenda Voss from the business card behind the photo frame. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, original hardwood, quarter-acre lot, listed at $680,000. $50,000 under the most recent comparable sale in the neighborhood. In the kitchen junk drawer I found the worst of it, a purchase agreement, unsigned but filled in. Buyer, Stonewall Capital Group, LLC. Cash offer. 30-day close. The seller's signature line was blank, but someone had penciled L. Caldwell in block letters beneath it, like a rehearsal. The listing agent was Brenda Voss. The contact on the buyer's side was a name I didn't recognize, but the seller's representative listed on the agreement was Aaron Caldwell, my brother. I sat on the kitchen floor and spread the pages around me like a paper mosaic. The lockbox, the listing sheet, the purchase agreement, and a sticky note in Diane's handwriting. Closing target, November 15th. That was 3 weeks away. I picked up the folder from the nightstand and opened it to the first page of the trust instrument. I read every word. Then, at 6 that evening, I called my mother. "Oh, Nora." Diane's voice had that specific warmth she used on parish volunteers and restaurant hostesses. Bright, managing. "How's Gran doing?" We had the most wonderful time in Aspen. The snow was just divine. "There's a lockbox on her gas meter." Silence. 2 seconds. Bree. "Sweetheart, that's being handled. Dad and Aaron have been working with a lovely agent to find a suitable transition plan for your grandmother. You know she can't keep up this big house on her own. There's a purchase agreement in her kitchen drawer." "Nora." The warmth dropped 1 register. "This is a family decision between your father, your brother, and me. We've been managing Gran's affairs for months. You don't need to worry about the details. She doesn't know the house is being sold, does she? She knows what she needs to know." Dan paused. I could hear the clink of a wine glass. "Aaron's company is in a difficult stretch. The house can fund a proper care facility for Gran and help your brother through a rough patch. It's the responsible thing. It's her house, Mom." "Nora." Her voice turned cold. "Your grandmother has dementia. She leaves the stove on. She got lost driving to the post office. She is not the person who should be making decisions about a $680,000 asset." Then she said it. "She won't remember the house by Christmas." The line hummed between us. "Then it's a good thing I remember," I said. I hung up, picked up the manila folder and Ruth Adler's business card, and held them side by side under the kitchen light. Tomorrow I would drive to Hartford. Tonight I had reading to do. My hands were steady, but my stomach wasn't. Sunday morning, while Lorraine dozed in her recliner, I scrubbed the kitchen, packed the leftover cake into Tupperware, threw the melted candles into the trash, and wiped buttercream from the good plates before stacking them in the cabinet where they would probably sit until someone came to clear out the house someday. That thought landed wrong, so I shoved it aside. 10:15, someone knocked. 2 people stood on the porch. The woman was around 60, with a silver bob, a wool coat, and a leather briefcase. The man beside her looked about 40 and carried a notary seal in a zippered pouch. "Nora Caldwell?" the woman asked. "Yes. My name is Ruth Adler. This is my colleague Nathan Pruitt. Your grandmother retained my firm 14 months ago." She held out a thick manila folder sealed with a wax paper flap. My grandmother's name was printed on the tab in blue ink. "She asked us to deliver this to you personally," Ruth said. I took the folder. "When the time came." "When the time came for what?" Ruth glanced through the screen door toward the recliner. Her expression softened by a fraction. "Come to my office when you're ready. Here's my card." She pressed it into my hand. "And don't discuss this with your parents before we talk." They were back in their car and pulling away before I could form a second question. I stood on the porch holding the folder. It was heavier than it looked, maybe 40 pages. The seal had been signed across the flap in Lorraine's handwriting. Looping, deliberate, and unmistakable, the same way she signed birthday cards and Christmas checks. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane. "Who is at the door? Don't sign anything, Nora." I turned the phone face down and carried the folder inside. Sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where the birthday cake had sat untouched the night before, I ran my finger along the sealed flap. Lorraine's signature crossed the seal. I recognized every curve. The capital L with its exaggerated tail, the double loop in the lowercase r. This wasn't a shaky signature. This was written by a woman who knew exactly what she was putting her name on. I broke the seal. Inside was a stack of legal documents I recognized from work. A recorded deed, a trust instrument, a durable power of attorney, notarized witness pages, and a physician's letter on medical letterhead dated 14 months earlier. Clipped to the front was a handwritten note on Lorraine's personal stationery. Cream paper, blue ink, the same deliberate script. Nora, when they come for the house, open this. Everything you need is here. Love you. Sorry. It has to be you. I read the note 3 times. Each time the words, when they come for the house, hit harder. Not if, when. 14 months earlier, before the forgetting had become so bad. Before she started calling me by my mother's name, before the wandering, before she left the stove on, before the day she got lost driving to the post office just 2 blocks away. She had known someone would come for the house. And she had prepared. I closed the folder and pressed my palm flat against it. Through the doorway, I could hear Lorraine snoring softly in her recliner, a crossword puzzle slipping from her lap. She had hired a lawyer. She had signed documents. She had left me instructions. That realization kept me awake all night. I lay in the guest room with the folder on the nightstand, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house breathe. Monday morning I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Something inside me said to stay. I found it while taking out the recycling. A realtor's combination lockbox clamped to the gas meter behind the hydrangea bushes, tucked just out of sight from the front walk. I knew what it was immediately. I'd seen them on nearly every listing in Briarwood. Someone had been showing this house. I went back inside and opened Lorraine's mail pile. 3 weeks of unsorted envelopes sat on the hallway table, buried between a phone bill and a coupon flyer. Then I found a listing sheet printed on Voss and Dean Realty letterhead. The same Brenda Voss from the business card behind the family photograph. I stared at the page, and suddenly the manila folder on the kitchen table felt much heavier than it had a few minutes earlier. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, original hardwood floors, a quarter-acre lot, listed at $680,000. $50,000 below the most recent comparable sale in the neighborhood. In the kitchen junk drawer I found the worst of it, a purchase agreement. It was unsigned but completely filled out. Buyer, Stonewall Capital Group, LLC. Cash offer. 30-day close. The seller's signature line was blank, but someone had penciled L. Caldwell in block letters beneath it, like a rehearsal. The listing agent was Brenda Voss. The buyer's contact was a name I didn't recognize, but the seller's representative listed on the agreement was Aaron Caldwell, my brother. I sat on the kitchen floor and spread the pages around me like pieces of a paper mosaic. The lockbox, the listing sheet, the purchase agreement, Brenda's business card, and a sticky note in Diane's handwriting. Closing target, November 15th. 3 weeks away. I picked up the manila folder from the nightstand and opened it again, this time turning to the first page of the trust instrument. I read every word. Then, at 6 that evening I called my mother. "Oh, Nora." Diane's voice had that specific warmth she used on parish volunteers and restaurant hostesses. Bright, polished, and completely controlled. "How's Gran doing? We had the most wonderful time in Aspen. The snow was just divine. There's a lockbox on her gas meter." Silence. 2 seconds. Then 3. "Sweetheart, that's being handled. Dad and Aaron have been working with a lovely agent to find a suitable transition plan for your grandmother. You know she can't keep up this big house on her own. There's a purchase agreement in her kitchen drawer." "Nora." The warmth dropped 1 register. "This is a family decision between your father, your brother, and me. We've been managing Gran's affairs for months. You don't need to worry about the details. She doesn't know the house is being sold, does she? She knows what she needs to know." Dan paused. I could hear the faint clink of a wine glass on her end of the phone. "Aaron's company is going through a difficult stretch. The house can fund a proper care facility for Gran and help your brother through a rough patch. It's the responsible thing. It's her house, Mom." "Nora." The register dropped again, all the way to the basement. "Your grandmother has dementia. She leaves the stove on. She got lost driving to the post office. She is not the person who should be making decisions about a $680,000 asset." Then she said the sentence that made something inside me go completely still. "She won't remember the house by Christmas." The line hummed between us. Then it's a good thing I remember, I said. Hung up. I picked up the manila folder and Ruth Adler's business card and held them side by side beneath the kitchen light. Tomorrow I would drive to Hartford. Tonight I had reading to do. Ruth Adler's office was on the second floor of a converted brownstone on Asylum Avenue. The waiting room had faded oriental rugs, framed diplomas from Yale Law, and a small brass sign that read, Adler and Associates, Elder Law and Estate Planning. I called at 7:30 the next morning. Her receptionist put me through in under a minute, which, if you know anything about law offices, told me they had been expecting my call. Miss Caldwell. Ruth's voice was the same measured calm I remembered from the porch. I'm glad you reached out. Can you come in today? I drove the 3 hours again. Ruth met me in a conference room with a pot of Earl Grey tea and a box of tissues she placed precisely between us without comment. Your grandmother came to me 14 months ago, she began. Early August of last year. She'd had an episode. She became disoriented while driving, ended up 2 towns over, and couldn't remember how to get home. A neighbor brought her back. She called me the next morning. Ruth looked at me. She already knew you. She knew my firm. Her friend Dorothy had used us for a trust. Your grandmother came in alone. He paused. And she was sharp. Focused. I felt my hands tighten around the teacup. Afraid of what? Ruth folded her hands on the table. Exactly what's happening now. She already knew you. She knew my firm. Her friend Dorothy had used us for a trust. Your grandmother came in alone, and she was sharp. Focused. Ruth paused. Afraid of what? Yes. Exactly what's happening now. Ruth folded her hands on the table. She told me, my son will do whatever Diane tells him, and Diane will sell the house the minute I can't stop her. She wanted to stop it before she couldn't. I slowly set my tea down. She chose you, Miss Caldwell. Specifically. She told me. You were the only one who would fight for the house because you were the only one who understood what it meant. Ruth opened her own copy of the folder. Your grandmother prepared for this. Let me show you how. She walked me through it piece by piece. 14 months earlier, in August of the previous year, Lorraine had come into that office wearing pressed slacks and pearl earrings, carrying a folder of her own, the deed to the house, tax records, her will from 1998, and a list of questions she'd written on yellow legal paper in the same looping blue ink I'd seen on the note. She was methodical, Ruth said. She told me she noticed the forgetting names first, then appointments, then the route to the post office. Her doctor had used the words early stage. She believed she had maybe a year, maybe 2, before the window closed. The window for what? Yes. For making legally binding decisions while she still had the capacity to understand them. Ruth turned a page. She wanted 2 things. First, to protect the house. Second, to choose who would protect her when she could no longer protect herself. She looked at me. And she didn't choose your father. Ruth said it without emotion, but the words landed in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. My father was Lorraine's only child. He'd grown up in that kitchen. She had put him through college, paid for his first suit, danced at his wedding, and when the time came to hand someone the keys to her life, she had passed over her own son and gone straight to me. 'Cause she knew. She knew Gregory would defer to Diane. She knew Diane would calculate. She knew Aaron would need. Your grandmother executed the documents on August 9th of last year, Ruth continued. She was determined to have everything done while she had full capacity. Dr. Mercer, her neurologist, provided a written evaluation that same day confirming she understood the nature and consequences of everything she was signing. Ruth tapped the physician's letter. This is your foundation. The legal structure was clean. I recognized every instrument from my work. First, a revocable living trust. Lorraine transferred the house, the deed, the title, everything, into the Lorraine E. Caldwell Revocable Living Trust, dated August 9th of last year. She remained the trustee while she had capacity. I was named successor trustee. If she became incapacitated, legal control of the house would pass to me. Not your father, not Aaron. Me. I stared at her. Second, a durable power of attorney. Lorraine named me as her agent for financial and healthcare decisions. The durability clause meant it would survive her incapacity. It wouldn't expire when she became sick. It would remain in effect. Ruth turned another page. Third, the physician's letter. Dr. Mercer examined Lorraine on August 9th and documented that she had full testamentary capacity. She understood what a trust was. She understood what a power of attorney did. She understood that she was placing her house beyond the reach of everyone except the granddaughter she trusted. So the house isn't hers anymore. Yes. Technically that's correct. The house belongs to the trust. Lorraine can't sell it as an individual. Ruth's expression hardened slightly. And under this trust structure, no one holding a personal power of attorney over Lorraine has authority over assets that have already been transferred into the trust. Only the trustee can authorize a sale. And the trustee is you. I felt the room grow very still. Once Lorraine is determined to lack capacity. Yes. And based on what you've described, leaving the stove on repeatedly, getting lost 2 blocks from home, the successor trustee provisions may already be active. Ruth leaned forward. But there's something else you need to know. If your family has had your grandmother sign anything recently, a new power of attorney, a listing agreement, or any other legal document, after she lacked the capacity to understand what she was signing, those documents may not be enforceable. She let the words settle between us. They may have had her sign something newer. I drove back to Briarwood that evening. The house was quiet. The porch light was on, just as it always was. Through the front window, I could see Lorraine sitting in her recliner, the television murmuring softly, her reading glasses folded on the armrest. I let myself in with the spare key she'd given me when I was 16, the one she'd never given my parents. Gran. She looked up. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, her eyes were absolutely clear. Not the soft confusion of most days. Not the pleasant fog. Clear as creek water running over gravel. You went to see Ruth, she said. I stopped in the doorway. You remember Ruth. I remember enough. Lorraine picked up her reading glasses and slowly turned them over in her hands. I remember being scared. I remember going to a lawyer and telling her what Diane would do. Did I get it right? I sat down on the arm of the couch. You got it exactly right, Gran. Good. She put on her glasses, then immediately took them off again, as if she'd forgotten why she'd reached for them in the first place. They've been bringing people through the house on Tuesdays, when the nurse is here. I hear the doors opening and closing. Strangers looking at my kitchen. I know. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Your father won't look at me when he visits. He talks to the walls. He paused. Aaron brought papers. I don't remember what I signed. I took her hand. It doesn't matter what you signed. You already took care of it. She squeezed my fingers. Her grip was thin but deliberate. I'm not gone yet, Nora. The words hung in the kitchen air between us, fragile and fierce. By tomorrow she might not remember saying them, but I would. I would remember for both of us. Aaron showed up on Wednesday. He didn't knock. He never knocked. He simply walked in with his car keys jingling and his smile already in place, entering every room as if the room should be grateful he'd arrived. Hey, Nor. He kissed the top of my head. He smelled like cedar cologne and the leather interior of a $50,000 SUV. Just checking in on Gran. That's sweet. I'm staying for a while. Oh yeah. He opened the refrigerator, helped himself to a LaCroix, and leaned against the counter like he owned the place. Taking some time off from the paralegal gig. He said paralegal the way someone might say hobby. Aaron, I know about the listing. The can paused halfway to his mouth. One beat. Then his smile adjusted. Not disappearing, just being reclassified. Warmth turned into negotiation. Look, I know it seems fast, but here's the thing. The company's in a rough patch. I've got a $740,000 balloon payment coming due in 8 weeks. If I miss it, the bank takes everything. Every project. Every contract. 3 years of work gone. So you're selling Gran's house. I'm helping the family manage an asset Gran can't manage herself. He set the can down. Nora, the money solves everything. Gran gets a nice facility. Mom and Dad stop worrying. Keep my business. Everybody wins. Everybody except Gran. His expression tightened. Gran doesn't even know what day it is. She knows people are walking through her house. Aaron's jaw clenched. He stepped closer. Don't make this difficult. Or family. Family helps family. Is that what you told her when you brought her the papers? He stared at me. Then the smile returned, but this time it was harder. Performative. It's basically sold already, Nora. The closing is set. He left his empty can on the counter and walked out without rinsing it. That night, I searched the bottom drawer of the hallway credenza, behind a stack of old Guideposts magazines. I found what they had made Lorraine sign. A power of attorney dated September 3rd, barely 2 months earlier. It named Gregory Caldwell as Lorraine's agent for all financial and property decisions. Stapled to it was a listing authorization for the house, also dated September 3rd, granting Aaron Caldwell the right to act as the seller's representative. I carried both documents to the kitchen table and laid them beside the originals from Ruth's folder. The signature differences hit me before I had even finished unfolding the pages. Lorraine's trust documents from 14 months earlier showed strong pen pressure, clean loops, and confident strokes, every letter connecting to the next with a distinctive tail on the capital L. I knew that handwriting. It belonged to the woman who wrote grocery lists in perfect cursive and signed my high school permission slips with a fountain pen. The September power of attorney was different. The lines trembled. The L barely rose above the baseline. The loops collapsed. The pen lifted between letters, leaving gaps where the natural flow should have been. This was not the hand of a woman who understood what she was signing. This was the hand of a woman who had been told where to press down. I pulled up the calendar on my phone and checked the date. September 3rd. My stomach dropped. That was the same week Lorraine had been taken to the ER after a fall. I had received a text from Diane. Gran took a tumble. Nothing serious. She's resting. And I had thought nothing of it. But the discharge summary, which I found buried in the mail pile, told a different story. Patient disoriented. Intermittent confusion. Recommend neurological follow-up. They had gotten Lorraine to sign a power of attorney during the same week she had been hospitalized for confusion. I photographed everything. Then I called Ruth. She came to the house on Friday. Not to her office. To the house. Ruth said it mattered that we do this at Lorraine's kitchen table. I understood why the moment she laid everything out. The table was old maple, scratched by 50 years of Thanksgivings and stained with coffee rings Lorraine had always insisted gave it character. Now it held 5 documents in a row, their edges aligned like evidence at a hearing. Document 1, Ruth said, pointing to the first page. The recorded trust deed filed with the Briarwood town clerk on August 12th of last year. The house had been legally transferred into the Lorraine E. Caldwell Revocable Living Trust 14 months earlier. It was stamped, indexed, and recorded. Public record. Document 2. The durable power of attorney naming you, Nora Caldwell, as Lorraine's agent, executed on the same day. 2 witnesses. Notarized by Nathan Pute. Then she moved to the 3rd document. Dr. Mercer's capacity evaluation letter. Dated August 9th. It was 2 pages, clinical and precise. Mrs. Caldwell demonstrates full understanding of the nature and consequences of the legal instruments she is executing. She is oriented to time, place, and person. She identifies her assets accurately and articulates clear preferences for their disposition. Ruth placed the 4th document beside it. Document 4. The September power of attorney, the one naming Gregory. The signature was shaky. There was no capacity evaluation, no independent witness, and it had been executed during a week when Lorraine's medical records documented confusion and disorientation. Finally, Ruth placed the 5th document on the table. The listing agreement. Aaron's name as the seller's representative. Brenda Voss as the agent. An off-market sale priced $50,000 below comparable homes. Ruth stood across from me with both hands flat on the table. The house has been in the trust for over a year, she said. Your grandmother cannot sell it as an individual. The September power of attorney, even if it were valid, doesn't grant authority over trust assets. And given the medical record, it almost certainly isn't valid. She looked directly at me. This sale cannot close. The house was never theirs to sell. I stared at the documents, at the two signatures side by side, one strong, one trembling, and at the physician's letter that drew a line between the woman Lorraine had been when she signed the original documents and the woman my family had later taken advantage of. She won't remember the house by Christmas. Diane's voice echoed in my head. But Lorraine had remembered. She had remembered before any of them. Ruth and I made a plan, quiet, methodical, the kind of plan built on paper instead of anger. Step 1 was obtaining a current capacity evaluation for Lorraine, something that could help establish whether she had lacked the mental ability to understand the September power of attorney when she signed it. That meant contacting Dr. Mercer's office and scheduling a formal neurocognitive assessment. Called Monday morning. The receptionist put me on hold for 11 minutes. When she finally returned, her voice had that careful, practiced quality I recognized from my own work, the tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news wrapped in protocol. I'm sorry, Miss Caldwell, but we've received a request to restrict access to Mrs. Caldwell's medical records. I gripped the phone. Restrict access from whom? I can't disclose that, but I can tell you the request came in approximately 6 weeks ago, and it specifies that medical records and evaluation results are not to be released to anyone other than the designated family contact. And who is the designated family contact? There was a pause. Gregory Caldwell, my father. They had locked me out of her medical records. I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. 6 weeks ago. That was mid-September. Right after they'd had Lorraine sign the power of attorney. They hadn't just gotten her to sign a document. They had built a wall around her. I called Ruth. They restricted her records. Expected, Ruth said. She didn't sound surprised. We'll file a HIPAA authorization under the durable power of attorney. Your PO predates theirs and names you as Lorraine's healthcare agent. I'll send the paperwork today. 2 days later I had the records. Dr. Mercer agreed to perform a current evaluation. The system works, I told myself slowly. But it works. Diane came to the house on a Thursday evening. She didn't bring flowers, food, or any of the things you'd bring when visiting your mother. She brought a brochure for Maple Glen Assisted Living and spread it across the kitchen table, the same table where Ruth and I had laid out the documents 3 days earlier. It's a beautiful facility, Diane said. Private rooms, a garden, activities every afternoon. I stared at the brochure. Gran doesn't want to leave her house. Gran doesn't know what she wants. Diane smoothed the brochure with both palms. Your father and I have been looking into this for weeks. If we transition her before Thanksgiving, we can have the house staged and listed by December 1st. I looked at her. She was wearing her church pearls and the cashmere scarf she'd bought in Aspen. You're staging the house for the buyer you already have. Diane's expression flickered. A flash so brief it was almost invisible, the tiniest crack in the plaster. Nora, I know this is emotional for you. You've always been attached to this house, but your brother's company is in real trouble, and this family needs to pull together. By selling a 79-year-old woman's home out from under her? Her voice cracked. Real tears or performative ones? I couldn't tell. After 32 years I'd stopped trying. The papers are all ready with the title company, she said. The closing is November 15th. This is happening, Nora. She left the brochure on the table. I almost walked away that night. It would have been easier. But if you've ever watched someone decide that an older person's worth came with an expiration date, you know exactly why I stayed. Had 9 days. The closing was set for November 15th at Capital Title Services on Main Street, 3 blocks from the Briarwood Town Green. Diane had booked it like she was making a dinner reservation. Efficient, final, and not open for discussion. The next morning, I sat in Ruth's conference room and laid out our options. Option 1, Ruth said. We file an emergency petition with the probate court to block the sale. It would work. Ruth was confident. But it would be public, slow, and expensive, and it would give Aaron and Diane time to scramble, to move Lorraine, hire their own attorney, and muddy the water. Option 2, I said. We let the closing happen. Ruth nodded. You walk in with the documents and let the truth do what truth does when it meets paperwork that can't withstand it. If you show up at the closing with the recorded trust deed and the capacity evidence, the title company will do the work for you. They can't insure a title that's in dispute. They won't close the transaction. It ends in that room. She leaned back slightly. And if they try to push through anyway, title officers are personally liable. No officer with a brain is going to record a deed they know is defective. Ruth removed her glasses and placed them on the table. This is the quieter path. No courtroom. No filings. Just documents on a table in front of witnesses. The buyer, the agent, the title officer, your family. They'll all be in one room. And the documents will speak for themselves. I thought about Lorraine's note. When they come for the house, open this. She hadn't told me to go to court. She had given me a folder. Let the documents talk, Ruth said. Had 9 days. I went home and started counting. Day 1 of 9, I filed a report with Adult Protective Services. I sat in my car outside the Briarwood Municipal Building and dialed the state elder abuse hotline. The intake worker was patient, precise, and completely unsurprised by anything I described. She'd heard it before. Different names, same architecture. I gave her the facts, the attempted sale, the questionable power of attorney, the medical records documenting Lorraine's confusion, the planned relocation, and the financial pressure surrounding the transaction. She listened carefully, asked me to repeat several dates, and then began taking down the names of everyone involved. Had 9 days. The closing was scheduled for November 15th at Capital Title Services on Main Street, 3 blocks from the Briarwood Town Green. Diane had booked it like a dinner reservation, efficient, final, and not open for discussion. The next morning, I sat in Ruth's conference room and laid out our options. Option 1, she said. We file an emergency petition with the probate court to block the sale. It would work, Ruth was confident, but it would be public, slow, and expensive. It would also give Aaron and Diane time to scramble, to move Lorraine, hire their own attorney, and muddy the water. Option 2, Ruth continued. We let the closing happen. You walk in with the documents and let the truth do what truth does when it meets paperwork that can't withstand it. If we showed up with the recorded trust deed and the capacity evidence, the title company would do the work for us. They couldn't insure a title that was legally disputed, and no title officer with any sense would record a deed they knew was defective. This is the quieter path, Ruth said, removing her glasses. No courtroom. No filings. Just documents on a table in front of witnesses. The buyer, the agent, the title officer, and your family. The documents will speak for themselves. I thought about Lorraine's note. When they come for the house, open this. She hadn't told me to go to court. She had given me a folder. Let the documents talk, Ruth said. So I went home and started counting. Day 1 of 9, I filed a report with Adult Protective Services. I sat in my car outside the Briarwood Municipal Building and called the state's elder abuse hotline. The intake worker was patient, precise, and completely unsurprised by what I described. She had heard it before. Different names, same architecture. I gave her the facts. A 79-year-old woman with documented cognitive decline, a power of attorney signed during a week of hospitalization and documented confusion, an off-market home sale priced below comparable value, a son who stood to benefit from the transaction, and a daughter-in-law directing the entire process. We'll assign an investigator, the intake worker said. You'll receive a case number within 72 hours. Is there anything that can expedite the process? Yes. You mentioned a closing date in 9 days. I'll flag it as time-sensitive. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat in the car for a full minute, watching 2 elderly women walk arm in arm into the library across the street, laughing about something. Normal. The kind of ordinary safety Lorraine deserved. When I returned to the house, I found a voicemail from Ruth. Nora, something interesting came up. An APS investigator told me informally that yours isn't the first report they've received about this situation. Someone filed an anonymous complaint about 6 weeks ago. They didn't follow up at the time because the complainant left no contact information, but the file exists. 6 weeks ago, right around the time they had Lorraine sign the September power of attorney, someone else had seen what was happening. Someone who hadn't been brave enough to leave a name, but had cared enough to pick up the phone. I didn't know who it was, not then. But the fact that the file already existed meant APS wouldn't be starting from scratch. The system was slower than anger, but it was moving. Day 4, my father came alone. He pulled into the driveway in his 10-year-old Buick. Not the car he drove to church or the club, but the one he used for errands, the one nobody would notice. He sat behind the wheel for a long time before getting out. I watched from the kitchen window. His shoulders were hunched, and he looked smaller than I remembered. He came through the back door the way he'd entered that house since he was a boy. He didn't acknowledge me at first. He simply stood in the kitchen and looked around at the cabinets. His mother had refinished them herself. At the window over the sink, the prism still hung where she had placed it, throwing rainbows across the floor every morning. She used to sing in this kitchen, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. Patsy Cline. Every Sunday morning. I remember. He sat at the table and placed both hands flat on the maple surface. I saw them shake. I know what you think of me, he said. Waited. I'm not. I didn't want any of this. He swallowed. Aaron's in over his head. Diane says the house is the only way out. And Mom. His voice broke just barely, a hairline fracture in a foundation. Mom wouldn't want Aaron to lose everything. You could still stop this, Dad. He looked at me for 1 second. One awful, trembling second. I saw the boy who had grown up in that kitchen, who had eaten cake from those plates, who had once been carried to bed by the same woman now sleeping in the next room. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Then he stood. I should go. He left through the back door without saying goodbye to his mother. I washed his coffee cup and put it away. Day 5, I bought a cake. Nothing fancy. A 6-inch vanilla cake with buttercream from the bakery on Elm Street, because that was what Lorraine loved. I bought 1 candle because 79 candles seemed like a fire hazard, and because I wanted to make her laugh. At 3 o'clock I set the cake on the kitchen table and put out 2 plates, 2 forks and 2 napkins. Gran, come sit. She shuffled in from the living room, her reading glasses resting on top of her head and a crossword puzzle folded inside her cardigan pocket. When she saw the cake she stopped. Whose birthday? Yours. We're doing it over. She sat down. I lit the candle. She stared at the flame the way you look at something you're trying desperately to hold in your mind. Carefully, deliberately, as if staring hard enough could make the moment stay. Make a wish, I said. She closed her eyes and blew. The candle went out on the first try. What did you wish for? Asked. She looked at me with those clear creek water eyes. I wished you'd stay. We ate cake with forks this time. She told me about the hydrangeas she'd planted along the front walk in 1987, the year I was born. She told me the kitchen table had come from her mother's house in Bridgeport, carried in on the back of a pickup truck in 1974, and that every scratch on its surface represented a Thanksgiving she'd survived and won. Then she put down her fork and leaned toward me. Don't let them take the table, she said. Her voice was quiet but fierce. I reached across the table and took her hand. I won't, Gran. I looked at the old maple surface beneath us. The table stays. I cleared the plates, washed the dishes, wrapped the leftover cake in foil, and wrote Gran's birthday round 2 on it with a Sharpie. 4 days until the closing. On day 6 the phone calls started. My Aunt Caroline, my father's cousin, called first. Her voice was careful, concerned. Nora, honey, your mother says you're trying to take control of Lorraine's finances. She says you're, well, she used the word manipulating. I held the phone away from my ear and stared at the ceiling. Aunt Caroline, did Diane mention that she and Aaron are trying to sell Gran's house while Gran has dementia? Silence. Then she said it was a family decision. It's a decision Gran didn't make. My mother's friend from the parish council called next, followed by Aaron's business partner, and then a woman from the garden club who had known Lorraine for 40 years. Every call carried the same script, with slight variations on the same theme. Nora was overstepping. Nora was emotional. Nora didn't understand the family's financial situation. Diane had done what Diane did best. She had shaped the narrative before I ever had a chance to speak. I didn't counter it. I didn't post on social media. I didn't call anyone back to plead my case. Ruth had told me, "The documents speak. You don't have to." But on day 6, around 9 that night, my phone rang one more time. It was Aunt June, Lorraine's younger sister, 81 and still sharp as ever, living in Bridgeport. "Nora," she said, her voice dry and clear, "I don't believe a word Diane is saying, and I want you to know why." "Why?" "Because your grandmother called me last year, in August. She told me she'd been to see a lawyer. She said she was putting the house in order while she still could. And she said, 'If anything happens, back Nora up.'" I gripped the phone. "I'm backing you up," Aunt June said. "Whatever you need." 3 days until the closing. Day 7. Ruth and I confirmed every detail. Capital Title Services, November 15th, 2 p.m., Conference Room B. The escrow officer was a woman named Linda Yates, who had 22 years in the business. Ruth's contact described her as thorough and strictly by the book. The buyer was Stonewall Capital Group, a regional cash acquisition firm that bought undervalued residential properties, flipped or rented them, and moved on. Their representative was a man named Daniel Fay, who had been copied on the listing agreement and purchase contract. Brenda Voss would attend as the listing agent. Diane and Aaron would attend as the seller's representatives. Gregory would come because Diane told him to. Ruth made one more off-the-record call to the title company and learned something that made her pause. "Linda Yates flagged the file 3 weeks ago," Ruth told me. "During the preliminary title search, she noted that the house was held in a trust. She contacted Brenda Voss for clarification. Brenda sent over a signed affidavit claiming the trust had been dissolved and the property reconveyed to Lorraine individually. Linda accepted it provisionally, but noted in her file that no recorded reconveyance deed had been found. The closing was scheduled as tentative, pending final title clearance. Clerical error, Brenda had called it. She had told Linda that the trust had been dissolved and the property returned to Lorraine's individual name. But that wasn't true. The trust had never been dissolved. The deed was still recorded. All it needed was someone to place the original on the table. The deal was already standing on cracked ice. Linda Yates had flagged the file. Brenda Voss had lied. And the recorded trust deed was public record. Here's the thing about paperwork that people underestimate. It doesn't raise its voice and it doesn't forget. If you've ever been the quiet one nobody took seriously, this next part is for you. Subscribe and stay with me to the closing table. 2 days left. 8. Everything was in place. Ruth would attend the closing as Lorraine's attorney of record, representing the trust. She would bring certified copies of the recorded trust deed, the durable power of attorney, and Dr. Mercer's capacity evaluation. Nathan Pute would attend as a notary witness. Adult Protective Services had assigned an investigator named Sandra Weeks. She wouldn't be in the room, that wasn't how the process worked, but she had confirmed that the case was active and time-sensitive. Whatever happened at the closing would become part of her file. I spent the afternoon at the kitchen table reviewing the documents one more time. The trust deed, the power of attorney, the capacity letter, the September POA with a trembling signature, the listing agreement, the purchase contract, and the discharge summary from Lorraine's September hospital stay. Everything lined up. Every date, every signature, every medical note pointed in the same direction. I practiced what I would say. Short sentences, no accusations, no emotion, just facts, delivered at the volume of a normal conversation. Ruth had coached me. You're not there to argue. You're not there to convince anyone. You're there to present documents that speak for themselves. Let the title officer do the rest. I wasn't the daughter they had ignored. I wasn't the paperwork one. I was the successor trustee of the Lorraine E. Caldwell Revocable Living Trust, and I had every legal right to sit at that table. More than a right, I had an obligation. That evening, I ironed a blouse and set out my work flats. The same flats I had worn the night I drove 3 hours to sing Happy Birthday to a woman sitting alone in her kitchen. Tomorrow they would sit down to sign for a house that wasn't theirs, and I would be there when they found out. The night before the closing, I sat with Lorraine in the living room. She was having a good hour, not a good day. Those were rare now, but a good hour was still a gift. She was working on a crossword puzzle with her reading glasses perched at the end of her nose, filling in the squares with a ballpoint pen. No pencil. She always said pencils were for people who didn't trust themselves. Gran, tomorrow's going to be a big day. She didn't look up. 7 across. Legal instrument of protection. 5 letters. Smiled. Trust. She wrote it in. Smarty pants. I watched her hand. The pen moved slowly but with intention. The letters were small and careful, not the looping confidence of 14 months ago, but not the collapsed writing of the September signature either. Somewhere in between was a woman standing at the edge of the window, still reaching for the glass. She put the crossword down and looked at me. You're staying. I'm staying. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out her reading glasses case, the leather one with the brass clasp she had carried since I was a girl. She opened it, took out a folded piece of paper, and handed it to me. It was written in her handwriting, shaky but legible. For Nora, the keeper of the table. Beneath it was her signature. Not the strong one from last year and not the broken one from September, but something in between. Trembling yet intentional. Written by a woman who knew she was fading and wanted to leave one more mark while she still could. I'm not gone yet, she said. I folded the note into my wallet. In the morning the folder, the note, and I would go to the closing together. Capital Title Services occupied a single-story brick building on Main Street, with tinted windows and a brass door handle polished to a mirror finish. I parked across the street at 1:45. Ruth pulled in beside me at 1:50. Nathan was already inside. We walked in together. Ruth carried her briefcase. Carried the manila folder. Conference room B was small, with 10 chairs around an oval table, a water pitcher, and a printer humming quietly in the corner. Linda Yates, the escrow officer, was arranging documents in neat stacks at the head of the table. She looked up when we entered, glanced at Ruth, and paused for half a second, the kind of pause that meant she recognized the name. Ms. Adler, I didn't see your firm listed on the transaction. I represent the Lorraine E. Caldwell Revocable Living Trust, Ruth said. We have documents relevant to this closing. Linda Yates's pen stopped moving. Before she could respond, the door opened behind us. Diane came in first, wearing a cashmere blazer and her church pearls. Her smile was already in position, bright and social, the hostess arriving at her own party. Aaron followed in a tailored sport coat, his jaw set, a leather portfolio tucked beneath his arm. Gregory trailed behind them, gray-faced and staring at the floor. Behind them came Brenda Voss, the realtor, with blonde highlights, kitten heels, and a stack of closing documents fanned in her hand like a winning poker hand. Last came Daniel Fay, the buyer's representative, wearing a navy suit and a no-nonsense expression. Diane saw me and stopped. Nora! Her eyes moved to Ruth, then to the folder in my hands. Her smile didn't change, but the muscles underneath it did. What are you doing here? Taking a seat, I said. I sat down at the table. Ruth sat beside me. I placed the manila folder in front of me and waited. The room went very quiet. Even the printer had stopped humming. Linda Yates looked at Ruth. You said you have documents. I do. Ruth opened her briefcase and placed 3 items on the table, one at a time, each centered and perfectly square, the way you would lay evidence before a judge. First, a certified copy of the recorded trust deed. This deed was recorded with the Briarwood Town Clerk on August 12 of last year and transferred the property at 14 Oakwood Lane into the Lorraine E. Caldwell Revocable Living Trust. Ms. Caldwell, Ruth nodded toward me, is the successor trustee. Diane's smile fell gradually, like a building losing floors one at a time. Second, the durable power of attorney naming Nora Caldwell as Lorraine's agent, executed on August 9 of last year, properly witnessed and notarized, and still in effect. Aaron leaned forward. We have a more recent power of attorney that supersedes. Third, Ruth placed the physician's letter on the table. A capacity evaluation by Dr. Helen Mercer, Lorraine's neurologist, dated August 9. It confirms that Lorraine had full testamentary capacity when she signed these documents. I also have Dr. Mercer's current evaluation, completed last week, confirming that Lorraine now lacks capacity. That means any document she signed after her cognitive decline, including the September power of attorney your family obtained, may not be legally valid. The room went still. Linda Yates picked up the trust deed, read it, and compared it with the title report in her file. Then she looked at Brenda Voss. Ms. Voss, you informed me that the trust had been dissolved. Brenda's face went white. I was told. The trust was never dissolved, Ruth said. The recorded deed confirms that. This property belongs to the trust. The sale cannot proceed. Linda Yates set the documents down, squared her shoulders, and said the 5 words that ended everything. I cannot close this transaction. She remembered. Lorraine had remembered everything. Daniel Fay closed his portfolio. Brenda stared at the table. Aaron gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles turned white. And Diane looked at me as if I had pulled the house out from under her feet. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Then Diane broke it. This is ridiculous. Her voice climbed as she stood, palms flat on the table, her pearls swinging against her chest. Nora is a paralegal. She has no authority. My husband is Lorraine's son, her only child, and he has a signed power of attorney that gives him full control. A power of attorney signed by a woman who was hospitalized for confusion the same week, Ruth said calmly. One with no capacity evaluation attached. And even if it were valid, it would not grant authority over assets already held in a trust. You can't do this. Aaron stood too. His voice was not theatrical like Diane's. It was raw. I have a $740,000 payment due in 6 weeks. If this deal falls through, Mr. Caldwell, Linda Yates interrupted, your financial obligations are not this office's concern. This is my grandmother's house. This is the trust's house, Ruth corrected. Administered by the trustee your grandmother appointed. That trustee is sitting at this table. Aaron turned on me. You're going to destroy this family. I looked at him and kept my voice exactly as I had practiced. Conversational, steady, and impossible to dismiss. You tried to sell a 79-year-old woman's home while she sat alone on her birthday eating cake. Nobody came to cut it. You had her sign documents during a hospital stay. You gave the title company false information about a dissolved trust. And you're telling me I'm the one destroying this family. Aaron's mouth opened, then closed. His fists tightened at his sides. Diane was crying now, loud, messy sobs. After everything I've done. Gregory sat motionless. He had not spoken since entering the room. He stared at the trust deed, at his mother's signature, and I could almost see him doing the math. She had planned this. She had gone around him. She had looked at her only son and decided he was not the person she trusted to protect her. Daniel Fay stood. I think we're done here. He nodded to Linda Yates and walked out. Brenda Voss gathered her things quickly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Ruth spoke into the silence. For the record, an Adult Protective Services investigation into the financial exploitation of Lorraine Caldwell is currently active. The September power of attorney will be formally challenged. Any further attempt to sell, encumber, or transfer trust property without the trustee's authorization will be treated as a legal matter. Diane stopped crying. She stared at Ruth, then at me, the tears still wet on her cheeks, but the expression beneath them shifting from grief to something harder. "You'll regret this," she said. "When Aaron loses his company, when your father has nowhere to turn, when this family falls apart, you'll remember that you did this." Understood. I picked up the manila folder and placed it in my bag. Then I looked at my mother. The cashmere, the pearls, the tears she had learned to deploy like weather. "You don't get to decide what she's worth," I said. Then I turned to Linda Yates. "Thank you for your professionalism." Linda nodded. "Miss Caldwell." Linda nodded. "I'll be documenting this closing as void and flagging the file. You'll receive confirmation by email." I walked out of conference room B. Ruth followed. Nathan held the door open. The November air hit my face, cold and clean, and I stood on the sidewalk for 10 full seconds before I remembered to breathe. Ruth touched my elbow. "You did well. I did what she asked me to. That's what I mean." I drove back to Oakwood Lane with the folder on the passenger seat, exactly where the gas station bouquet had been 9 days earlier. The house was still there. The hydrangeas still lined the front walk. The porch light was on. I went inside and found my grandmother asleep in her recliner, a crossword puzzle in her lap and her reading glasses resting on her nose. I knelt beside her chair and tucked the quilt around her shoulders. "It's done, Gran," I whispered. "The house is safe." She stirred. Her hand found mine, the same thin grip, the same wrist as narrow as a paper towel roll. Her eyes opened, cloudy at first, then clearing for just a moment. "Nora, I'm here. Did you keep the table?" I laughed. A real laugh, the kind that rises from somewhere deep and surprises you. "I kept the table." She smiled. Certain. "Good girl." Then she closed her eyes. Within a minute, she was asleep again, her breathing slow and even, the crossword puzzle rising and falling on her chest. I sat on the floor beside her recliner and looked through the doorway at the kitchen, at the maple table, scratched and coffee-stained, still standing where it had stood since 1974. The folder was in my bag. The note was in my wallet. The house was in the trust. And for the first time in 9 days, the counting stopped. Here's what happened after Aaron's balloon payment came due 8 weeks later, right on schedule. He missed it. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings on his development projects, 3 half-finished townhomes in Glastonbury and a commercial lot in Wethersfield. Aaron Caldwell Properties filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in January. He sold the German sedan. The last I heard, he was working as a project manager for someone else's firm, making a third of what he had earned before. He never called to apologize. Diane's standing in Briarwood fractured. Not all at once. Reputations erode slowly in small towns, but the story leaked. People talk. And June talked. Linda Yates documented everything in the closing file. The church group chat, the one where Diane had posted her Aspen selfie, went quiet around her. She stopped attending the library board meetings. She and Gregory moved to a condo in West Hartford that spring. My father emailed me once in March. 3 sentences. "I should have done more. I know that now. I'm sorry." I read it twice. I didn't respond. Some apologies are too late to be anything but a record of what a person finally knows they should have said. Adult Protective Services substantiated the complaint. Over the following 3 months, through 2 probate hearings that no one in my family contested, the September power of attorney was formally voided. The court appointed me as Lorraine's legal guardian and confirmed my role as permanent trustee of her trust. I deferred my bar exam. I took a leave of absence from the firm. I moved into the guest room at 14 Oakwood Lane, the one with the ceiling crack I had traced since I was 6, and became the person who made sure Lorraine Caldwell ate dinner, took her medication, and sat on the porch in the afternoons when the light filtered through the hydrangeas. It wasn't the career step I had planned. It was the right one. On a Tuesday in April I baked a cake. Vanilla with buttercream. Nothing fancy. I set it on the kitchen table. The table from Bridgeport, the one that had survived 50 years of Thanksgivings and 1 attempted theft. Lorraine came in from the living room, crossword puzzle in hand. "Whose birthday?" Nobody's. It's Tuesday. We're having cake because it's Tuesday. She sat down. She picked up a fork, took a bite and closed her eyes. This is my recipe, she said. It is good. She took another bite. Don't change it. We ate in the kitchen as afternoon light striped the floor through the window. The prism still hung above the sink, throwing small rainbows across the room. The table held. A person's worth doesn't expire when their memory does. And sometimes, the quietest love in a family is the only love still keeping watch. That's my story. One empty birthday party, one manila folder, and a grandmother who remembered first. If this story reminded you to check on a loved one's legal directives, do it today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.